Welcome to the Corporate Venturing Insider Series, where I interview top practitioners in the CVC world and learn with you the best practices and golden nuggets that they have accumulated over their career. In this episode, we will be learning from Lucia Sinapi-Thomas, head of Capgemini Ventures. Lucia, could you take a few minutes to share your story and how you got to where you are today?
I started my career, I was a tax and business lawyer, and then joined Capgemini. And I spent most of my career in the finance area, being group deputy CFO back in 2013, before I moved to business. And that was actually a turning point. That was moving into venturing because I was leading a business called Business Platforms, which was a set of units delivering BPO services on the IT stack. So as diversified as a third-party administration for insurers, reference data in banking, or a customer center as a service, which was a technology platform. And what was very striking, what I could feel in this business operational role, is how important IT systems are if, as a business, you want to launch new products and innovate and lead on a market. If you have legacy systems, for sure, it's a hindering factor. And naturally, that opened the way to absolutely identify, for instance, fintechs that were changing the game, in particular on the front end, which were absolutely agile and which replication, of course, with legacy system was difficult. That was for me an awareness call on the importance of innovation and innovation coming from startups. So you see the link with ventures, and that led me to create Capgemini Ventures, which is now live since 2019.
Very nice. Thank you. So I'll start first with your background, because I always ask how someone's background could be an advantage, but also a source of bias. In this case, you have a strong background in finance and you've been a CFO. How much of that is an advantage to head a CVC, and how much of that could maybe bias you, especially when we think about early stage ventures?
That's a good question. Actually, given the formula we have on the CVC, I'm protected from the bias of being formerly a CFO to some extent, because most of what we're doing is focusing on the business aspect of it. And we are delegating the management of the portfolio and the financial, to some extent, the VC standard due diligence. But what's important and what's an advantage in my journey and having been deep in finance is that first, there is no inhibition, right? And that's important because there is an element of risk, but you look at the factors that can turn the startup into a champion tomorrow. And so the quality of the team, the synergies with our business are important points, absolutely critical in combining the criteria. So no, for me, it's a strength.
Yeah, and I can see you're the type of CFO I like, where you understand the element of risk and what that means to grow a business. So that's very nice. One more thing which you mentioned is a feel and touch. You were close to understanding how companies, businesses, entrepreneurs need IT to make innovations, to do something new. And you were probably at the forefront of the fintech innovation, which now is more obvious than it was at the beginning. How much of being in Capgemini, being at the forefront of all these innovative endeavors, made it obvious you needed a CVC?
That's a good question, because it was not so obvious. Sure. Because Capgemini is not a traditional corporate. It is a services company, an IT and consulting DNA, a strong company that delivers services to a wide range of clients in a large spectrum of sectors, right? When we look at startups and innovation, we have our own needs, because any corporate, we are not immune from the need to transform, to accelerate on digital transformation. Absolutely. But in parallel, we have all our clients' needs. And our DNA is to identify and integrate the best of breed solutions. We have full neutrality when it comes to technology, because we are not a software editor. We do integrate and combine across the range, whatever makes sense and whatever works best for our clients. And in today's world, the traditional players do not suffice. Startups, because of new technologies, cloud, but also with the growing importance over the last 20 years of private capital, have benefited from record high funding, which is turning them into an absolutely critical source of innovation. All corporates know that, and this is why we're here to talk today, how to take the best out of that open innovation, depending on whether you have a strong internal R&D, your approach will be different. In Capgemini, we are not developing our own products, so we don't have so much of that R&D specificity. On the reverse, we have the duty to identify on our clients R&D mode for being helped to navigate the startup ecosystem to select the best, and we help them qualify. On top of that, when they want to adopt at scale, all of a sudden, they are faced, of course, with the complexity of the legacy IT that you still need to handle, connect, interface, transform, renovate. And that's when we come into play again. Our role is evolving, but remains fundamentally the bridge for our clients between technology and business.
Nice. I like a lot. One thing you mentioned is, and serving, perfect DNA to start a corporate VC, which means that you're thinking about serving entrepreneurs. Can you tell me a bit about how you leverage the DNA of Capgemini into your own corporate VC and how you have your processes to engage with entrepreneurs?
So Capgemini Ventures, in reality, covers three aspects. The corporate VC, we'll come back to that. The bulk of what we do, in reality, has to do with facilitating and helping business units of Capgemini partnering with selected startups. And partnering starts from helping them to source whenever needed, to qualification, and formalizing the collaboration legally, contractually with the startups. For all this, I have a central team with an operational team out of India, but also a network of startup ecosystem leads in the various geographies embedded into the operations to help the business very closely. Indeed, we do facilitate for the business the link with startup ecosystem. It's not that obvious for such a large group used to work at industrial scale to collaborate on the market with startups. We only start Series A and following, but still, it's a challenge. And conversely, for startups, navigating the complexity of a large organization like Capgemini is a challenge too. So having a dedicated team that can monitor the performance of the collaboration, be the voice of the startup to business. Sometimes in multinational groups, everybody is under pressure and we have a variety of priorities to deal with. So dedicating the appropriate bandwidth for startups is not obvious, even if we have the appropriate processes, the business sponsors, etc. So what works well and what could be improved is absolutely important to identify, because you always need to adapt along the way what the collaboration format. So being able to discuss in a very authentic way with the management team of the startup is for them, I believe, very important.
Very nice. And then I want to go back about the feel and touch of the innovations. You mentioned Capgemini can see new trends early because of what IT could enable. Do you find that this corporate VC initiative helps you to see it even earlier? Because then you can see some of the startups starting something even before the IT tools have caught up.
You're right. So I'll start from the macro view. I strongly believe that the VC industry, given the firepower that it has, could be, there is some read-through into where we call it where the money flows, right? When you look at the stats, where investment go, definitely it does complement what market analysts take as a view, what we see in the field. And it's very interesting to cross these sources of the data. I realize that our business leaders are interested to have that additional source of information. So we should not neglect that because of the massive amounts of funding that this is now attracting. The second thing is that it's such a buoyant source of innovation that it's very difficult to spot the trends. Even if you have armies, you will never be able to replicate the coverage that the entire VC industry has in terms of analysts looking and portfolio managers discussing with entrepreneurs and doing their own selection. We cannot ignore that the VC industry plays a role of spotting. They have criteria, they have experience, and it's very professional. So over time, when you look at how portfolio concentrate, you can say that they do play a role in nurturing the champions of tomorrow. For us, for Capgemini and the likes, there is an element of risk in working with startups if they don't survive tomorrow. So ensuring that you do the right bets is also important. For our client needs to know that our approach is not anecdotal. We need to demonstrate a structured approach is important. And us working along these, adopting VC standards when we look at startups is also an insurance that we don't make stupid bets.
Okay, there's a lot of things I love about you've described, and there's a few golden nuggets, but I'll start with something you said, which is massive amount of information. And then you get into the problem of what is noise, what is signal. And you really want to give to your client the signal, not the noise. And then you talk about doing the right bet. And then the word I love is insurance. So I want you to first double click on this insurance concept.
Maybe it's not the proper term because there is no guarantee at all. What matters is that you look at a topic globally. So let's look at, for instance, data, privacy. You can spot a startup in a country, but if then you don't take a more holistic view and you don't benchmark, you might make the wrong choice. It's very important to have a two approach, and working with VCs is a way to win time because their portfolio is grants us access to a qualified level of information on their startups. So for us, it allows us to leverage our impact and our access to that market intelligence of what are the trends that we should take care of. And when it comes to selecting an emerging solution, a promising startup solution, we combine our expert view with the VC standards in order to ensure, to some extent, to de-risk our choice.
De-risk is a very nice way to say it.
Market. So that's the way it works.
Very nice. And we are touching on what I think is most special about your design, this hybrid design. Many CVCs try to learn best practices from financial VCs. You decided to go, like you said, time to market. You take the best of Capgemini. You choose a financial VC who you want to work, who already knows the best practices, and you combine. But you're very clear on who owns which best practices and value add. How did you get this idea? Because it's not common, and yet it feels so logical.
It's not common, and it's not that obvious neither. Why? Because you need to have utmost confidence on both sides. Let me explain why. For the VC, to some extent, delegate a slight element of their sovereignty, right? Because in the pre-selection, we can be wrong. So of course, Isaí can veto, but if they keep vetoing, we don't deploy. It's not a win-win. Conversely, for us, we are delegating the management of the portfolio after the primo investment. It's a different formula from investing and making 100% decisions from day one to exit. The other thing is that, of course, we are sharing the carry. All the remuneration is totally standard, which means that you are giving away some of the value creation. So on both sides, there is an element of, I would say, a give and take in the formula. What made it possible? I think the first is that Isaí founder, Jean-David Chauboredon, spent 12 years in Capgemini. So culturally, there was a fit and understanding of what works and what could work less. You should know that Jean-David was not the best advocate of CVCs, which he could see struggling on some elements, etc., and mistakes that could be attributed to CVCs. So that was not easy at the start. When we discussed, we had no intent to build that. It was just recognizing on both sides the difficulties, the challenges, but the opportunities that come up with that hybrid formula, where at the end, what is critical is the level of trust that Isaí and Jean-David Chauboredon had to put on us in the work together, because that formula can only work if we tightly work together and we respect each other's point of view. At the end of the day, it's about investing at the crossroad of Capgemini business and strategic and fit and VC standards. So Isaí keeps us honest, and conversely, it needs to rely on us on developing the startups, the go-to-market, so making the smart money reality. So it's indeed a trust deal.
I'm sure they're not keeping you honest, they're keeping you disciplined. I'm sure you would be honest without them. But what I like is you talked about sharing value creation, which is for me the definition of a win-win partnership. You're very clear about value creation and sharing together. I also like, and this is important, I think, in that design, which is not being an advocate of CVCs, which means being very conscious about why CVCs typically don't work or make mistakes or create frustrations. I want to move into the investment itself. And I understand that this is in partnership, but you also mentioned you're part of the investment committee. So can you tell us about how you make your decision for the investment itself? Is it a big investment committee? Is it a small one? Are you part of it? And what do you think about in terms of investment criteria to invest?
So first, I'll start with the investment thesis, which you will not be surprised has to do with our business. So we look at only B2B startups. With the recent acquisition of Altron, engineering is also now in the scope. And obviously, sustainability falls into that global investment thesis. The role of ventures is to facilitate the bridge with startup ecosystem. So we're having what we call venture dialogues with the business leaders, sectors, or offers, and ask them basically out of their priorities whether there are holes in the solutioning that startups could be fulfilling. So we're having that regularly, and that helps us shaping a little bit the demand in terms of what could be fit for purpose and prioritize a little bit areas that we would be looking at. The sourcing comes from wherever. Some come from the field, of course, you would expect. Some come from the VC. So we manage actively the pipe jointly with Isaí. When we see, and we can strike collaborations with startups that have nothing to do with raising funding. Ventures is working well beyond the CVC scope. But when a startup we're working with is raising funding, and naturally that comes into the investment pipeline. Conversely, we can also push startups that nobody knows. It's an opportunity to push to the field and raise awareness. So it works both ways. So then I'm calling a pre-selection committee that is composed of group experts that are nominated for 1 year. So we have rotations to expose a maximum of our experts or leaders to that process, because it's also a way to engage them. We run through the pros, cons, including the analysis from a VC perspective. And we only decide to proceed if we find the proper anchorage, the proper business sponsor that we feel can deploy the joint go-to-market and the partnership part to deliver the smart money. When that's pre-existing, it's quicker, but it works at any stage of the collaboration. At Capgemini level, the investment committee it works like any VC investment committee. You have Capgemini representatives, so obviously I'm sitting there. The CFO of the group is sitting there, as well as the head of M&A. And we have ISAI representatives, but the leader can absolutely, for instance, decide to veto or not to go, even if it is, in particular, if the due diligence has proven that something went wrong. It never happened, but it could, typically. Good. So we have really two instances, one which is really focusing on business and the other one which is VC standards.
Very nice. So two things I want to touch on, your experts rotation and the fact that because of the CVC, you're getting an influx of startups. Maybe you don't invest in them, but they could actually be good partners or maybe at some point customers of Capgemini. Is that side benefit already not strong enough to just justify having a CVC for a company like Capgemini?
It's indeed an interesting trend that because we have a CVC, we are visible from other VCs. When they have in portfolio a startup that they know could be of interest working with us, they reach out to us independently from any co-investment, funding round, etc. And that's interesting and that matters because in reality, there is a vested interest on both sides and no conflict of interest at all. The fact that we can co-invest is only an additional lever. It's the cherry on the cake. What matters for VCs is the success of the startup they have in portfolio. And what Capgemini, from that standpoint, has always been, and remains a wonderful channel to market for tech solutions, whatever they are. And it's particularly relevant when it comes to startup.
Very nice. And the second point I want to touch is this experts rotation, which to me is like a genius move because you get someone from Capgemini to be exposed to the innovation ecosystem, grow their career and their understanding. At the same time, you get the experts you need to be able to do the sourcing and pre-selection. Why 1 year? And how do you choose them?
That's a good point because actually some of them remain for more than 1 year.
Okay.
So it is a question of having sufficient representation of the various practices of the group, and the composition in reality also is variable because whenever we have a specific topic, so take cyber, for instance, we invite the cyber experts that have been involved in looking at the solution, even though they are not part of institutionally of that committee. It is an evolving scope. What matters is, number one, that we get the right qualification from our own experts. Second, that we have the right level of engagement of the business teams to work with the startup moving forward. And third, that this pre-selection committee is a visible instance, and it's also important in terms of, I would say, recognition. Being part of this is also an interesting recognition internally.
Very nice. If you think about the entrepreneurs who may be listening to this video, what would be the main reason for them to want to work with Capgemini Ventures and to get funding from you? what is the number one? You mentioned go to market and go to the US, but what would be your elevator pitch?
My advice would be that they need to be convinced that their solution will sell with Capgemini clients. This is the magic formula. Then we can help. But must is really that the solution is fitting the market needs of our clients that are tier one clients, and for which, of course, innovation matters, but adoption at scale matters too.
And maybe this is part of the superpower, which is you work with these tier ones. These tier ones don't typically work with very young companies, startups. Are you able to bridge that gap quicker?
We'd love to. Definitely would love to. It's not that easy, especially the more business critical the solution, the more, of course, clients would tend to be risk adverse, right? So that's where our role becomes even more critical in helping in the selection, de-risking, etc. So we are playing the traditional role, but adapted to these solutions. For sure, when we can see that when we work with startups, we definitely make a difference because we have a sales machine, especially because when it's adopted, when you have the sufficient level of understanding, training of our own people, then you can deploy on many geographies. It becomes a real powerhouse. It is not an easy journey. We shouldn't hide behind the finger because it comes with challenges. We are trying to help there, but when it works, I can tell you it's very powerful.
And you have a world-class team. So there is no doubt that this is a big advantage to any startup. I love how you were candid earlier, but you had not realized some of the parts about CVC, like the value of being an insider and so on. Lucia, thank you so much for your time. This was so nice of you to share so candidly. And I really appreciate that your design is very different from many, but hopefully the audience is opening their mind that there are many ways to do it. And your time to market and your ability to adopt best practices, actually acquire in a way best practices by working with a financial VC who have all the best practices already embedded is a huge golden nugget. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nicolas. Bye-bye.